Okay. Hi. I don't know how this works, but hi, this is Joan Carling. I am a Kankanai Indigenous activist from the Philippines, and I'm working with the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. And I am also an expert member of the Permanent Forum. I don't see the questions. Welcome. Hello. Hello. It's not yet. Hmm? I suppose. Mm-mm. Hi, good evening. This is Joan Carling. I see there's two viewers now, but I don't get any questions that I can respond to. So perhaps you can ask questions. Okay. Yes, I will respond to the question about my work. I am an Indigenous activist, and my organization is the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. And we work to strengthen the capacity and solidarity of Indigenous peoples across Asia. We work to promote the rights of Indigenous peoples, particularly to lands, territories, and resources. And this is where we have been engaging with the extractive industries, especially dealing with the violations of the rights of Indigenous peoples over their lands, territories, and resources, and also the impacts of such activities to the environment. So we do a lot of awareness raising with communities, engaging with the private sector like mining companies, and informing them about the impacts of the activities they are doing in the different communities. So that's particularly the kind of work that we do. We also engage in the policy advocacy work with the private sector, the World Bank, international financial institutions, to put in place strong policies that respects the rights of communities, particularly their right to free, prior, and informed consent. So that's, in summary, that's the kind of work that we do. Yeah, maybe while waiting for other questions, I can also say that with our work with communities affected by the extractive industries, it's very revealing that once companies come into the communities, what they normally tell the community members are all benefits or promises of roads, jobs, but they don't present the adverse impacts of their operations, the destruction of their land, that after the mining operation, they're just going to leave it without full rehabilitation. So in the end, communities are becomes worse off instead of being better off with this kind of imposed so-called development projects that are not respecting their rights. Any more questions? Okay. The question on what makes a community indigenous. Okay, what we refer to as indigenous peoples are those peoples that have historical relations with their land, and their identity and their culture are tied with their land, that in spite of colonization or even the development of states, they're able to maintain that kind of distinction. And with the mainstream development, they are considered as the marginalized, and part of the poorest of the poor. So the main distinction of in indigenous peoples is their close attachment and identities in relation to their land, which defines their culture and ways of life. So in Asia, for example, they are referred to as the ethnic minorities or hill tribes in the context of Thailand, or the Janajatis or Adivasis in India. In the US, of course, they are called the Native Americans, or they call themselves the First Nations in the case of Canada and the US. Okay, do I need to expound on this now? To add, while there are no questions, there are actually estimated more than 300 million indigenous peoples across the world. The biggest is in Asia. 2/3 are located in Asia, and these are particularly in India, where you have almost 100 billion indigenous peoples called the Adivasi or the tribals, but you also have India, China, I mean, which are the ethnic minorities. Okay, the next question, do or your groups negotiate separate arrangement? We facilitate, we don't negotiate ourselves directly with community, with companies, but we facilitate local leaders to be able to express themselves in engaging with companies. So we provide capacity building for them. We make sure that they understand their rights and their entitlements, and what are the international instruments that they can use, like human rights, human rights instruments, including also if there are any policy of the company, like for example, corporate social responsibility or any kind of safeguards. So when we engage with these companies, we make sure that we are engaging together with the local communities, because they are the ones that are directly affected, and they should be able to speak for themselves. Uh, okay. Any follow-up question on that? So, okay, well, there are no other questions. Just to elaborate a bit, like for example, in Cambodia right now with Angkor Gold, I had a meeting with the local leaders because they didn't know how to engage with the companies, especially since they've been offering unfair compensation as payment of their lands that's going to be destroyed or used by the mining operation. So we had to explain to them about the free, prior, and informed consent, that the company should honor the law on community land rights in the context of Cambodia, that they should be engaging with them in good faith, and that they should be able to demand, make their demands according to what they think is best for them. So after that discussion with the local leaders, they went back to their communities to inform them more on how the free, prior, and informed consent should be operated, but should be done by the companies. And they started talking to the companies, saying that they need to implement the requirement for free, prior, and informed consent of the communities, because they have the rights over their lands. Okay, do some make better agreements with companies? What makes for a better agreement? Okay, so for this question on agreements with companies, what is a better agreement? I think the better agreement, or the best agreement even, is one that explicitly provides for the respect and protection of the communities affected, and that they are provided with equitable benefit sharing. And there are existing agreements like this, but they are not really related to extractive industries. One that we can say that has been well negotiated is the one in Australia, where the communities, the indigenous peoples were able to negotiate the kind of compensation that they will receive, their share of royalty for the profit, their the protection of the environment, because they just allowed the mining in an area where it's very far from their villages, and in ensuring that the water will not be affected. So these are the kind of agreements that were reached by the company and the communities. And it's for extractive industry that is especially large scale, there are few agreements reached with communities. So the industry needs to really reflect on why it's difficult for them to gain partnership with communities and learn from this kind of good practice, so that the way they do their business is not actually going to make communities worse off, or that it will destroy their cultural heritage, but instead they become the beneficiaries as well, and ensuring that environmental protection is done properly. Okay, any other question? Okay, since there are no other question, I just want to share also the experience of communities, mining communities, in the case of the Philippines, where we actually have a law that requires free, prior, and informed consent. But this has been violated by many of the companies because they just want to operate just for profit. And there is already a bad record of mining companies, and so what they did was, instead of getting the consent of the local, the community members and the genuine leaders, they formed a fake council of leaders from the people that they have bribed, and then they made it appear that the consent was given by this group of people that they have formed. So it's a clear distortion. It's a clear manipulation also in terms of getting away with the kind of requirement that is needed for them to operate in communities. Okay. Okay. On the why do you think there are few agreements? Uh, it's because of the bad record of companies in terms of respecting the rights of communities, providing equitable benefits, but also the destruction they are causing on the environment. Extractive industry by itself is really if it really has serious adverse impacts also on the environment. Especially with the highly mechanized mining operation, where they use, for example, in the case of gold mining, where they use chemicals, yeah, like mercury and cyanide. And in a lot of the gold mining communities in the past, they are actually now the poorest districts after the mining operation has happened, because their water sources has been destroyed. The land cannot be planted anymore. They were not rehabilitated by the mining companies, and there are no jobs left for the people. And so, and also the way companies, a lot of companies are even also treating the labor. No, they are not provided with protective gears. Their salaries are very low. So even if you look at the labor sector of their operation, they also have a bad record. But because people don't have jobs, they just end up working in the mining, and a lot get sick. And there is even statistics that prove that those working in mining have lower lifespan. So these are the concrete impacts that people see. And so the mining companies or extractive industries should then have to reflect on how they deal with these problems, the the environmental impacts of their operations, the social impacts of their operations, so that they can come into an agreement with communities. Okay, this question on the displacement issues, right? When companies operate, they normally take over the land. So they either deal with provide compensation, and communities are forced to negotiate for compensation because they will be displaced, because governments provide the license to these companies, and that is being used by these companies to literally grab the lands of communities and displace them for the operations. And this has been happening all over, like from India to Bolivia to Venezuela to the Philippines. And this is making more indigenous peoples marginalized. So when we also talk of displacements of indigenous peoples and local communities, we need to also account for the disproportionate impact to women. Women suffer more from displacements, especially among indigenous women, because they are the ones that are working on the land, are providing for the foods from the land, from the forests, and they have the traditional knowledge to also get medicines, for example, for the families. And when they are displaced, then it's the women who worry about food. They lose their traditional knowledge, and their health and well-being are also affected when they were taken out from their lands, because their identity and well-being is very much related with their interaction with their environment, with the natural resources around them. So when you take them out from there, it's really like their whole being is also seriously impacted. So these are also part of the issues of displacements. Children also suffer a lot, of course. Malnutrition is happening in displaced communities. More conflicts are arising because then they will, when they're displaced, each family will then have to fend for themselves. But when they are in their own territory and using their own resources, they are doing things collectively. So they work together in the rice fields. They go together in the forest to gather forest food. They do hunting. But when they're displaced, these are all gone. So that means this a displacement is not just causing the more poverty, but they're not also able to maintain their social cohesion of working together, of the cooperation that they have as a community. That's also destroyed when they get displaced. Okay. More questions? Okay, on the okay, how one should ensure community are better respected. Yeah, this has been what we've been telling companies, that when they plan to do operation in an indigenous community, then they better at first do a consultation of the people, so that they understand what are the concerns of the people, but also understand their perspective. What can be the impact of the operation, for example, in terms of their culture, in terms of their indigenous institutions, in terms of how they live. So, and in my experience with dealing with the companies, these are not in their consideration. They only think of how best to do their mining operation to get to lessen the cost and have the biggest profit. It's in terms of what's this cost benefit analysis. So when communities talk to them, it's like you're talking on a different level. So it's important then for companies to also understand the perspective of the communities, and also for them to understand what are the rights of the communities. For Indigenous peoples, it's very clear that we have rights over our lands, territories, and resources, and that has to be respected. So any engagement with communities should be in the context of a partnership that provides for equitable benefit sharing, protection of the environment, sustainable livelihoods for the communities, and that their culture will not be negatively impacted. So, this will have to be part of any kind of agreement between the companies and the communities. And what I've learned in my years of experience is that this kind of agreements should be clearly written out, especially also in the local language, and it's that the affected communities understand it well, and that they have a record of these agreements. And there should also be terms included that when the conditions are not met by the company, that their community have the right to demand more, or that the operation should stop. So when we also talk of ensure community are better or respected or rewarded, the bottom line is that there should be a clear terms on how communities are also able to exercise their indigenous ways of life, their indigenous institutions are also be able to operate so that they maintain their social cohesion, and that in the agreement, the equitable benefits should be clear, and that it should go to all the community members. Because in certain cases, we have also instances of what we call elite capture, that it's actually only the leaders in the community or even the middle class in the community that are getting the benefits, which is completely wrong. It should be equitable, and that the poorest of the poor should be prioritized in the kind of benefit sharing that is done with any company. Yeah, okay. As there is, okay. Okay. This is, please say few words between community and environment to a global economy. I don't exactly understand what this means, between community and environment to a global economy. If I understand it right, you're referring to what globalization is now, that I mean that we are now part of the global economy, right? Is that what you're referring to? Because my take of this question is that since, yes, I mean, we are now becoming a globalized world, even remote communities are now affected by the global economy, but at the same time we're also facing a severe problem on climate change that communities also cannot escape. And so it's everybody's responsibility to protect the environment. And for indigenous peoples, we've been doing this for centuries. In fact, the highest, the most conserved and the richest biodiversity areas are indigenous peoples' territories. But these are now also affected by the global economy with the impositions of extractive industries saying that we need to exploit the remaining oil, gas, and natural resources. and this is and the way it's being done is very very destructive. I mean, it has serious environmental impacts, and this is going to affect all of us, not only the communities, but also all of us, because now of the problem of climate change. So I think we need to reflect again on how the global economy is actually I mean, the crisis that we are facing now, because we believe that the solution are actually in the communities. The solutions are locally defined, and that's the best way for us to contribute in terms of what sustainable development is now, as everybody's talking about, and also in effectively addressing the impacts of climate change. Now that I mean, it's a big environmental problem for everyone. I hope I responded to that question, if I understood it. Uh, I don't see any more questions. So I don't know whether I should expound on the earlier questions asked. Okay, is still date, and is there probably date to date any system established for community education? Yes, there are in even in developing countries, but this in a number of remote communities, there are no schools, or if there are schools, the teachers are not going there. So that's a classic case for India, uh, for Nepal, for the remote areas of the Philippines, and others, no, like Cambodia. So a lot of communities are not actually served by the educational system, simply because of lack of access. But particularly for indigenous children, the dropout, even for kids going to school, the dropout is very high. And the reason for this is because for indigenous children, when they grow, as they speak their own language, but when they go to school, the language used is the national language. And this is alienating for them. So, because a lot of schools do not allow for mother tongue language. And this is a major challenge that indigenous peoples are facing in terms of the education system that they get, I mean, in their own countries. The other factor is also because the education system does not include indigenous people's histories, or or folk tales or fairy tales, or so they cannot relate to the kind of education that they're getting. And in a lot of ways, uh, indigenous peoples are even portrayed in education materials like books, that we are savages, that we are barbarians, that we are uncivilized. And this provides more. It actually encourages and enhances discrimination for indigenous people. So these children, they feel discriminated, and when they go to school, that's why the dropout rate is very high. So what we are also advocating is mother tongue education, at least for the primary level, so that it helps them adjust to the education system. I'm not saying that education is not important for indigenous peoples. This is very important. It's the manner and the methodology and the approach that has to be improved so that it becomes more inclusive to indigenous peoples, and that it does not discriminate against indigenous peoples. Okay. Is there a way to convince local or regional government that it would be good for the entire region for them to work with communities as much as with extractive companies? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to really engage with government at the local to the regional level. For example, here, we are engaging with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations called ASEAN. They have different intergovernmental bodies. They even formed the ASEAN Intergovernment Human Rights Commission, but it's not working as it should be. It's not really dealing with the human rights issues of the peoples in ASEAN, and they're not also promoting human rights. So that is quite a major challenge. At the local level, this is more open. There are actually some areas that local governments are in partnership with indigenous peoples or local communities in terms of sustainable forest management, for example, in terms of livelihood activities, and there's more avenue, and it's more engaging at the local level because the local government are down to their communities. I mean, that's also where they are, so they can also feel and see the situation of their constituents, and thereby partnerships and engagement with them is relatively easier than at the national and regional levels. Okay, and in relation to particularly the extractive industries, there are two folds for local authorities. The trend is that companies work with them and practically bribe and co-opt local governments, and so this happens particularly with extractive industries that are not having good record of relating with the communities. So it's tough once the local governments are already paid off by the companies, and thereby it's also makes it more difficult for communities to assert the recognition and respect of their rights. Okay, we move on to the next question. Okay, please say health status of community before and after industries. Okay, in like I said, more indigenous peoples are relying on their natural environment, no? So their health or including their diet is also based on that kind of interaction they have with the environment. So, for example, they get their medicine from the forest. So that when they get sick, and that is part of their traditional knowledge. So and then they get their food from the forest, and so there is somehow food security for communities that are close to the forest, because they can get forest products, and they can do planting some of their food crops. Now, when extractive industries take them out of their communities, like I mentioned earlier, Then malnutrition it becomes a major problem for children. For workers, they have health problems, or especially on their respiratory system, um, and because of overwork, their physical well-being is also very much affected. Women are not able to get medicines, so in case they have problems, especially pregnant women, then they get into complications and to in giving birth, but also their babies are not as healthy as when you live in their natural environment. And with the impacts of, for example, the chemicals used in the operations, there are also, like for example, that when the water bodies get polluted from mercury and cyanide, skin diseases is a major problem. And there are recorded many cases of women having miscarriage when they use the water that is contaminated by mercury and cyanide. And of course, because of the impact to the water, either a scarcity of water or polluted water, then communities get diarrhea and other kind of diseases. So these are the health impacts to communities, no, who used to be better, that they're healthier prior to the operation, but after operation, or during operations, these problems crop up as a major issue of communities affected by the extractive industry. Okay. Oh yes. Oh, sorry. I did not select it, but I've responded to it. I hope I have responded to the issue of health now. Okay. Is there one or two cases that you worked with that you feel turned out especially well? What I can cite is the case in the Philippines where I have been engaging with the communities. It's a gold mining company, and there were landslides, and the soil cave-ins happening in the mining area, because this is a strip mining operation. So we requested, I talked to the lawmaker, the congressman from that area, to conduct a congressional inquiry on this environmental and social problem. And this was the first time that the Committee on Environment of the Philippine Congress went all outside the capital and went to the area to see for themselves the impact of mining. And after they've seen the devastation and talked to the people, they came out with a resolution demanding that the company should look into this problem, and then that they should provide proper compensation to the communities. So I think in a way that helped raise attention to the issue of the environmental impact of mining, but also to the impacts to the people, and that at least the people felt that they were listened to finally, that the lawmakers of the country are finally listening to them. So that I think is quite a good response, right, to this kind of problems faced by the community. More questions? Another one, well, there's no question, is another example that I can give is the exploration activity of a mining company where by law in the Philippines, there should be the free, prior, and informed consent. And so I had series of meetings with the community members, and they really don't want the mining company to operate because it's at the heart of the village. So it will cause displacements, but also destruction of their rice fields and their livelihoods. So they did not even want to have the exploration take place. So what we did was, because of we insisted that the free, prior, and informed consent should be respected, and the communities agreed to have a referendum. And if the majority says no, then that should be honored. So the company had to agree to a referendum, and then the referendum was done, and it was clear 80% of the people did not like the exploration to take place. So the company had to leave, even if they already started digging in some areas. So that's also one way of how the communities exercise their right to decide on what's going to happen in their area. Okay, the question on what are uh, the factors would you attribute successful engagement? I think one major factor is good faith engagement from the company, from and the government and the community. That's one, and I think that there should be an overall consideration of the perspective and views of the communities with regards to mining operations or the extractive industries operations, and that these concerns should be properly addressed. And if these are properly addressed, then communities can engage into a partnership, like what I said, the case in Australia, where they finally came into an agreement because all their concerns were properly addressed, including equitable benefit sharing, including protection of the environment. So my point is that once, because this extractive industry is really seen with serious impacts. And if there is no sincerity demonstrated by the company and the government to the community where they can gain their trust, then it will be difficult. It will be difficult. So a successful engagement should always start with a good faith negotiations with an open mind, and with respect to the rights of the communities, but also and also to present, not being honest and present the whole project and not just on the benefits, and later communities will see the negative impacts, and that's why companies have a bad legacy in a lot of communities, because they were not being honest when they present their project to the communities, and they don't address the concerns of the communities. So this has to be rectified. This has to be corrected. And it cannot be business as usual now. That the mutual respect should be there at the outset, and that a human rights approach in the negotiation should also be encouraged. Okay. The question is community made trouble to company in an unethical manner. It's not clear to me what this is trouble to company. unethical is, it's not clear to me whether the company is the one unethical or the community is the one unethical. But in most instances, it's really the companies that are really unethical in their behavior, because they don't even respect communities. They think that they are they are there to save communities from poverty, that they are saviors, that they are there to bring development for the people. But in reality, they're leaving a big mess, and the profit they take away. So they're not actually providing real community development. So it's unethical for companies just to do their mining and completely ignoring the rights and entitlements of communities. To me, that is what I consider as unethical. Especially for indigenous peoples, because we own our lands, territories, and resources, and we need to be part of the decisions that are made in our territories, and we need to take part in any kind of projects, whether it's to make sure that it is consistent with our life ways, our culture, and that it will lead to our own development. So the violation of our rights is what I consider as completely unethical. Okay, tell about tell about the future prospects of community in industries. Yeah, for communities, I think what they want is sustainable resource management systems, and they can partner with any company to do that, to have a sustainable resource management systems. And I do believe to some extent this can still be profitable for companies, and if it's in the spirit of genuine partnership, then you can say that communities will indeed be able to develop. And so if there is a clear understanding, a mutual understanding, and a mutual benefit, then I think there's a future for companies and communities to be working together. I would just like to reiterate that this should be within the framework of respect for rights. This should be in the framework of sustainable development. This should be in the framework of environmental protection. Because if the partnership of communities and companies are not within this kind of framework, it will also only lead to inequality. It will only result to increasing, because the companies are not benefits and the communities. But now, for example, now we have the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human, which sets the right framework. And I think if the companies are serious to implement those guiding principles, then there's a lot of hope that finally genuine partnerships between communities and companies are going to work out for community development and for sustainable development. Okay, thanks for that comment. Yes, in terms of, do you have written agreements between communities and companies? Yes, there is a case in like I said, in Australia, where they have a written agreement between the company and the community in terms of benefit sharing, in terms of the conduct of operation that will not destroy their cultural heritage, that it will respect, that it will protect the environment, and the royalties that the communities are entitled to every year from the mining production. So these are the ones in the written agreement of communities. Now there are also written agreements, but in smaller companies, right? Like for example, in some companies engage in renewable energy. So there are also agreements where the communities are provided with free electricity from the renewable energy generated, and that they get payment from the use of the land for this kind of renewable energy, like the installation of windmill or solar power. So there are also agreements like that. And I think that are good models to follow in relation to respecting also the welfare of communities. It's 2 minutes left. Are there no more questions from the viewers? Okay, if there are no more questions, I think the time is up. This is my first time to do this. It feels strange, but thanks for joining this talk. Thanks. No more questions? Okay, I will have to sign off then. Thank you. Thank you.